Hey guys, so I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. I don't know how successful I'm going to be at that. Let's face it, I am rarely successful along those lines, even when I have absolutely nothing to report. But the last 3 days has been completely barking insane, just to let you know. So, so as you guys know, as I posted, kind of Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, we, I get information from TurboTax. Oh, your refund's gonna land in your account within the next, 3 to 7 days, and I'm like, oh, okay. Out of sheer curiosity, now I had done this an hour earlier and there was nothing, but out of sheer curiosity, I checked my account and discovered, yes, indeed, the deposit was made. Posted about it. Hubby and I discussed what we were going to do. And then I went to bed. I went to bed knowing the baby didn't have to be at school the next day. So at least I don't have to ferry him. But at the same time, I was like, I'm going to be up at 8 o'clock in the morning so that I can go ahead and, call the DMV because they open at 8. Well, those plans went slightly off the rails. The reason why they did is because I have had so little sleep, like several days running. And I had set the alarm for 8 so I could definitely wake the baby and be up myself. 7 o'clock in the morning, I received a phone call from the naval base, and they were requesting my email. And they confirmed that email was right. They were sending me onboarding documents and welcome aboard, and we'll let you know what we need, and blah, 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 blah. So I'm literally asleep and trying to not sound asleep while talking to this guy. I guess it was passable because he was like, okay, cool. Well, we're going to go ahead and send those. Those should pop up in your email. Just go ahead and complete everything there. Show you're still interested and complete some of the documents. Okay, no problem. The only thing I could think is I fell back out for another hour was, wow, you know what? I really need to start doing push-ups. I wake up at 8 o'clock, stagger out of bed, get the baby moving. And I go, shit, completely forgetting all about the DMV and reset the alarm for 9. So I wake up at 9:30 and my brain is going, no, 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 because all my experience with the DMV means this is going to take hours. Hours. You'll be stuck there for hours. Well, I call the DMV, and the main DMV in this area is by appointment only. And I was like, oh, man. And she was like, and we're closed this week. Seems somebody walked in with a fresh case of COVID, and they freaked out and shut the whole thing down. So it was closed for the rest of this week. But she said there was one that was closer by. Now, it had a really odd name. It was Silverdale Auto Renewal. And I'm like, oh, okay, is this the address? She was like, yeah. And she was explaining how to get there from where I'm at. And I was like, okay. But it's like literally 7 minutes away from the house. So I was like, okay, cool. And for context, it is literally about 8 minutes, about 2 or 3 minutes actually, from the place I'm going to be working at, which is about 8 minutes away from me. So there you go. This day Wednesday, I was also expecting a call from the lady who is going to be placing me for the temporary work. Temporary service that went ahead and let me know she should be contacting you today. If she doesn't, let us know. So thus began that adventure too. So I'm having 2 workplaces contacting me on the same day. One did at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the other one in unknown time in the future. So I call the DMV, find out this information, and then call the Silverdale DMV. After learning, no, they don't do appointment. You can just walk in. It's pretty slow there. It's not that big of a deal. You can just walk in and get this done. So I call them up for fax information because now I'm armed with what I need to be able to get my registration and my tags and everything else. So here they ask for, an e-copy of the title and the odometer reading of all things, and that you have a Washington State driver's license that's not expired, that's up to date. I'm so used to registration, insurance, blah, 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 blah. This is all they need. So I, get Silverdale's fax number, tell them I'm going to be having something faxed over, call the credit union. The lady I speak with at the credit union seems kind of confused. And I'm like, this is what I need. And she was like, okay, well, usually the information we send isn't accepted by most state agencies. And I was like, okay. I'm like, well, this is what's required. This is what I need. She was like, okay, we'll try to get the information over. This should have set off alarm bells, but it did not. Because I'm still waking up. And so I, reiterate, okay, cool. I mean, I'll wait if I have to. And she was like, okay, and puts me on hold. And then she comes back and she was like, we'll send the information you requested. I'm like, okay, basically a copy of the title. She was like, yeah, no problem. Okay. I get to, I stop, get gas, grab myself like, a little treat, some Rockstar, which I know I shouldn't drink, but I do anyway. I'm anticipating being there a while. So I pull up, I find the place is like, within minutes. I'm there like right around 10 o'clock. And I walk in and the lady has me sit down over here. It's a very, very small place. And I'm like, okay. And I'm seeing like people streaming in and out, like when I get in. And I'm like, okay, so it's not that busy, huh? I sit down and I tell her who I am and that a document should have been faxed over. She was like, oh, that's you. I'm like, yes, ma'am. And she was like, oh. So I should have known there was something wrong there. It turns out they sent the wrong document. They sent what's known as an e-lien, which means it shows that they have the lien against the vehicle, that they are the title owner, blah, 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 blah. And she was like, we can't use this. She was like, no, we can probably get you temporary. That'll be about, 60 days worth. She's like, but we can't use this. And I'm like, well, I'd rather avoid temporary. I'd rather go ahead and get the plates, registration, all that updated, as soon as possible. I'll go ahead and make some phone calls, see what I can do. So I call the credit union back, get somebody completely different. And I'm like, okay, this is who I am, provide all the relevant information. And the guy's like, well, we sent the fax that you requested. I'm like, yeah, they got it. It's just not what they need. And he was like, we sent it. I'm like, yes, the fax was received, but it's not what they need. And he was like, but they got the fax. I'm like, yes, they got the fax, but it's not what we need. So I told him, I'm like, it's a copy of the e-lien. That's not sufficient. What they want is a copy of the title. He was like, oh. He was like, we don't have that. I'm like, you're the lien holder, right? He was like, yeah. I said, then the title essentially belongs to you until I repay the loan completely, and then it completely belongs to me. He was like, yeah. And I was like, but you don't have a copy. He was like, no, that's the state. I said, you hold the lien and you do not have a copy of the title. He was like, that's correct. You'll find that state of Utah. So I had him give me the number, and this is where things get kind of crazy. And it's only because I did something that, to this moment, I feel guilty about. I actually yelled at somebody loudly within my vehicle, because by this time I'm in my car, because I just could not hear with people going in and out all around me. I just could not hear, inside that office, as quiet as it was. So I was like, all right, I write down the information and I call the state of Utah. It's kind of amazing that I got through, because usually you cannot get through to the state of Utah for anything. I mean, even before COVID, it was hard to do. It's not something I even thought about at the time. But I'm kind of lucky that technically in Utah, it's 11 o'clock in the morning. So I call, ask to speak with the gentleman, give him the last 8 of my VIN. He finds me and he was like, oh, okay, yeah, we got you. He was like, what's your address? And I said, well, this is my previous address. And I give it to him. He was like, oh, it's your previous address. I'm like, yes, sir. I said, I've moved. I am trying to transfer the car from, Utah to Washington. And he's like, Washington State. I'm like, yes, sir. And I'm like, this is what I need to do. This is what I need. I said, to be able to transfer everything. He was like, okay, well, first of all, what is your address? So we can update the mailing address. I'm like, okay. Here's the mailing address. And I give him my new address. And I said, but you can see the title there. He was like, yeah. I said, well, the credit union is the lien holder. He was like, yeah. I said, well, here's the problem. I called the credit union, and the information that they have is not sufficient. I'm going to need a copy of the title. And he was like, I don't know if I can do that. I'm like, do you have it in front of you? He was like, oh, yeah. He's like, I can see it. It's right in front of me. Everything's squared away. Looks good. He's like, I'm going to go speak with my supervisor, though. Goes to speak with the supervisor. He's gone for a bit. All right. He comes back. He was like, so you want a copy of the title? I'm like, yes. I'm going to need it faxed to this number. He was like, I can't do that. I was like, you can't what? He was like, I can't fax you a copy of this. I'm like, and why not? He was like, well, it's not allowed. I'm like, but you've got it in front of you. You could literally print screen, print that up, and fax that information. They're not wanting an original. They're not wanting any of that. They just want an e-print of the title. No, ma'am, I can't do that. This is where I kind of promptly lost my shit. Because he was like, you may want to speak with the credit union and see what they can get you. I'm like, but here's the problem. The credit union doesn't have a copy of the title. Because you guys won't give it to them either. They sent me to you because you're the state. And you have the title on file that you're now looking at, that you're saying you can't get to me. And he was like, no, ma'am. He was like, don't shoot the messenger. I'm like, look, I already know, because by this time, I'm actually raising my voice. I said, here's the thing. I am sitting in front of the place where I transfer the registration and get everything updated. I'm sitting right in front of the place. This is what they require. Okay? I have everything else I need. The only thing I don't have is this. I spoke with my credit union. They sent me to you because you have the documentation I need. And now you're telling me I can't get that documentation. I can't have a fax to a government agency to be able to switch everything over. He was like, yes, ma'am, that is correct. You're going to have... I'm like, I can't speak with them. And he was like, the e-lien should be sufficient. I'm like, but it's not. The state of Washington says it is not. And he was like, well, we could send it to you, but it would take a couple of weeks. I'm like, okay, whatever. How would this happen? So he was like, well, first you need to go ahead and go to utah.gov. You need to get this form. You need to fill this out. And he gives me step-by-step instructions on how to do that. And he was like, then you have to sign the document and put in a $6 money order to the state of Utah and mail it to us. He was like, then we will send you a copy of the title. I was like, you mean it has to go through the mail? He was like, correct. I said, you don't have any way to do this electronically. I can't do this over the phone with you right now. And he was like, no, ma'am. By this time, I am in tears and I'm furious. And I'm in tears because I'm furious. I'm not even thinking about what it's like to be a woman hollering inside a car that distinctively stands out. I'm thinking about being inside a car in front of a DMV with Utah tags. I mean, black car, bright Utah tags, and bright Utah license plate. And the tags say 9/20/20 in bright red. Now, a lot of DMVs have police officers just hang out near there. This one was too small for that. I mean, literally, when I went to go pull up the place, I should have known that things were going to go wrong. Because it's so small, you could sail right past it. And I literally went to go sail right past it, looked over, went, oh, and like turned in. So I should have known right about that time I was going to have issues. But I didn't. So here I am yelling at this man. And I'm not doing it like the top of my lungs, but I've definitely raised my voice. I am in tears. I know he can hear it. And I'm like, so now I'm just going to be bounced back and forth between you guys and him. Unless I print up a copy of this when I don't have a printer and get a money order and put that in there and send it to the state of Utah, wait for it to be received within 2 weeks, and then wait another, 2 to 3 weeks before it can be sent to me? He was like, yes, ma'am. I'm like, this is why I'm so fucking glad I'm not in Utah anymore. I fucking hate Utah. I'm like, do you know? I mean, I realize I'm cussing at this man. I'm like, do you know how insane this is? How stupid this is. It is the modern era. There is no electronic way to process any of this. You have me snail mailing you information that I need right now. I am telling you, sir, I am right in front of the freaking DMV. I was assured that this was taken care of, and then I find out, no, it's not. Because what I need, my credit union doesn't have, though they're the owners of the title, they don't have it. And I'm sent to you. You have it. And you're not going to give it to me. Well, you're not going to send it to a government agency via fax. And you're looking right at it. And he was like, no, ma'am. I'm like, okay, great. So I guess I need to call them and find out what to do. And ask them why they don't have a copy of this thing that they actually own. He was like, well, yes, ma'am, I guess so. I'm like, I guess so. I'm like, I freaking hate Utah. I'm so glad I'm out of there, and soon I won't have to deal with you guys anymore. Everything that you guys handle, every way that you handle things is completely crazy and has no relevant context to the rest of the United States. And he was like, well, ma'am, every state does something different. I'm like, oh, yeah, trust me, I know about that. So I hang up with him. Can't remember what else I said, what else he said, but that was the basic gist of it. Get back on the phone with the credit union. Get Linda this time. I'm guessing she's heard about my communications with the other dude. And I was like, I just called the state of Utah. They can't get that to me. And an e-lien is not sufficient. I'm going to try to get temporary tags, but can you tell me some other way, other than freaking snail mail, to get a hold of this daggone title? So I can switch everything over and be completely free of Utah. And she was like, yes, ma'am. She was like, I'm so glad to speak to you. She was like, I was wondering if you'd call. She was like, I realized we sent this over, and I realized what we sent. And she was like, you know, the title clerk. I'm like, you all have a title clerk, and you all don't even hold titles, so I don't even understand what this is about. And she was like, the title clerk is going to send off the requested information to the state. We'll get a copy, and when we get a copy, we'll make sure that you can get a hold of it. I'm like, but how will I even know? I'm like, I just got done yelling at some poor state employee over something he can't control because Utah's way of doing everything is completely back-asswards. I mean, it is just ridiculous. And she was like, yeah, she was like, we're weird here. I'm like, beyond weird. And she was like, yeah, and every state does things differently. She was like, a lot of states accept this, but a lot of them don't. And I said, well, this state only accepts the title. She was like, I'm having our title clerk put in the request. She was like, we can do it a little bit faster than you would be able to through utah.gov. She was like, we'll put in the request and we'll make sure to get it to you. And I'm like, but how will I know? How will I know? Just call in 7 to 10 days, cross my fingers and hope. And she was like, I tell you what. She confirmed my email, and she was like, I'll make sure to go ahead and get an email sent to you with a copy of it. So you can just print it right up, do whatever it is you need to do. She was like, and then you'll be able to transfer completely. And I'm like, okay. I said, but I want you to know, I thought all this is taken care of, and I'm sitting right in front of the DMV. Right in front of the DMV. And if I didn't have the option of getting temporary tags, I'm literally being told by the state it's a month. And by you guys that it could be up to 3 weeks. And my tags are expiring soon. Of course, I didn't say my tags were expired. Like, my tags are expiring soon. And this is crazy. This system does not work. And she was like, yes, ma'am. I understand. And I was like, well, I said, as long as I get that email, I'll keep an eye out for it. Thanks for your help, Linda. I'm not going to yell at anybody else again today. I'm like, 'cause I already feel bad enough for yelling at this state guy. She was like, well, he's probably used to people yelling at him. I'm like, that doesn't make it any better. So, done with the conversations, knowing that at some point in time in the future, I'm going to have a copy of this title coming to me. I walk back in, and I talk to the lady, and I'm like, well, I said, so it looks like I'm going to be getting temporary tags. She was like, yeah, I figured maybe. She was like, I've dealt with Utah before, and the way they do things is weird. I'm like, yes, it is. But supposedly, within the next 2-3 weeks, I'll have what I need to make this permanent. She was like, well, you can have temporary tags until then. They're good to up to 60 days. She was like, so you'll have enough time to get all this taken care of. I'm like, fantastic. So I walk up to the counter. Now, by this time, 45 minutes has passed, people. 45 minutes. So I spent 45 minutes to 50 minutes shuffling between these two agencies and like tearing apart a guy at one of them. I walk inside and the lady takes the E-Lean paperwork, confirms my address. I tell her I have the odometer reading. She's like, at this point, it's not necessary. It's just temporary tags. Okay. Show her my driver's license. And she was like, it's 130.25. I said, for what? She was like, we're doing the transfer. She was like, the transfer's done. She was like, but it's for the temporary tag. She was like, you know, I'm like, the transfer is done. She was like, yeah. She was like, your vehicle is in temporary status with us. It is being transferred from Utah to Washington. We're acknowledging your vehicle is here. I was like, are you serious? She was like, yes, ma'am. And I said, it's $100. She was like, it's $130.25. I was like, awesome. Lady next to me goes, oh, you guys don't take card? And I look up and see cash or check accepted only. And I'm like, and I didn't even bring my checkbook. She's like, there's an ATM right behind you. So I was like, okay. She's like, now it only does by 20s. I'm like, okay. So I walk over to the ATM, I pull 140. Maybe 5 minutes has passed during this whole entire exchange. I bring it over, she makes change, hands me back the change. And she's like, now we're just waiting for the computer to do its thing so I can print up your tags. That took about another 5 minutes. And computer is being slow. She's like, I apologize for that. Meanwhile, I've lamented that I've basically torn this guy apart. And she was like, no, it's okay. And I'm like, no, it's really not. I don't, you know, I've worked guest service forever. I don't go around tearing apart people over the phone. Literally, guys, I can count on both hands, unfortunately. How many times over the last 30 years I have lost my shit at somebody that is supposed to be providing a service to me. I will say 5 of those times, unfortunately, has been unjustified because it's not anything the person could do anything about. And at least 4 of them have been over the phone. I'm the type of person who usually apologizes to the waiter if they spill something in my lap. And yeah, so I'm still feeling totally bad about this. At that time, I was just worn out and just feeling like crap. Eventually, you know, her computer gets it together. I'm still like waiting on tenterhooks to see if anything else goes wrong. She was like, here's, you know, your receipt. And I'm like, just that fast? She was like, that fast? She was like, well, while waiting for the computer that fast. I'm like, so okay, I spent the last 50 minutes on the phone trying to get a title. That's going to take about 2 weeks to receive. And you're telling me that literally the car has been transferred from Utah to Washington with temporary tags in less than 12 minutes. She was like, yes, ma'am, that's what I'm telling you. She was like, okay, here's your receipt. Here's your temporary registration. Make sure you leave that in your glove box. She was like, this over here. She was like, this is what you put in the window, driver's side. So I was like, okay, well, what about the metal tag? She's like, you get that title in? She was like, make sure you bring in your odometer, your driver's license. She's like, we'll already have you inside the system. She was like, that will take, you know, approximately, you know, a couple of minutes. We should have everything ready for you. And I'm like, how much will it be? She's like, $36. Now, guys, the reason why I sat on this for so long, and my husband and I spent literally the last 4 months, once we realized how far out of date our tags were, the last 4 months sweating every time we passed by a police officer, okay, is because I was told this was expensive. Now, to be fair, when I moved from Kentucky to Utah, Kentucky nailed me on a bunch of taxes. I have never walked out of Kentucky DMV without being hit for less than $400. Honest to goodness, there's always something. When I transferred my car from Kentucky to Utah, Utah's transfer fees, registration fees, everything else, $700. Bang. So to me, that's what constitutes as slightly expensive. Okay, but doable. I had completely forgotten that every time after that, whenever I updated my registration and tags with Utah, it was about $170. Because it's vehicle inspection, emissions test, and then you get your tags. So when I got told earlier last year that it was expensive, my mind immediately leaps to double $700 and up. I literally set aside $3,500 for the car. Okay, so this is when it gets better. So I walk out of there for $130.25, and I put the temporary tag in the back of my vehicle. I drive it home. Hubby takes off the Utah plates. Okay. So altogether, for about $170, my car is transferred, and I'm just paying for the plates a little bit later. I'm just paying for those plates. That's what I'm paying for. $36 for actual metal plates. That's what I'm paying for. The registration was probably like maybe $40. The transfer is what cost the most. The transfer is about anywhere between $70 to $80. And then, of course, taxes, this, that, and the other. So basically for less than $170. Once everything's all said and done, I will have my car properly licensed. This is not expensive to me. So I'm kind of going in the back of my mind, you know, how it is in Labyrinth. You know, maybe you didn't ask the right questions. When I was having the conversation, obviously, I made a lot of assumptions and I didn't ask the right questions. Either that or else she has a really expensive vehicle. Because to me, expensive is $1,500 and up. And I'm calculating all sorts of other things in. So this is where it gets fun. On my way home, I promptly take the wrong turn because I'm still going, what the fuck just happened? And I get lost. By the time I look around and go, wait a second, I don't recognize any of the scenery. I'm like going hell with it. And I call Emily's garage, who is our garage since we moved here. They've always taken really good care of us. And they're honest, professional people. They're basically awesome. You can even see the reviews on Google. The one that says, you know, Phoenix Dragon, that one's me. It'll tell you all about it. They are just awesome. So I went ahead and I set an appointment for 10 o'clock the next day. My husband said he would take it in. And I said, yeah, we just got to make sure we do it by this time and then get you on to work and, you know, depending. And let them know, need brakes, tune-up, oil change. And they were like, okay, cool, no problem. And they confirmed the appointment, everything. I managed to find my way home. And I decide, you know, I'm not going to just head immediately to home. I've got a little bit of time. So I head to the grocery store, you know, grab a couple of things. Put some gas in the car, everything like, well, I'd already put gas in the car, but grab a couple of extra things from the grocery store. And then I'm headed home. On my way home, I get a call from the lady who's going to be overseeing my work at my new workplace. And I set up a time. You know, she tells me what my schedule's going to be. I find out it's going to be 32 hours, but if I want a full 40 hours, there's ways to make that happen. I can discuss that with her during orientation. But on Monday at 9:30, I need to show up to basically get my badge done. And I'm like, okay, all right. 9:30 on Monday, badge. And then I'll find out what the orientation schedule is. And she was like, your schedule's going to fluctuate for the next month or so. Just to let you know, I do apologize. She was like, well, we'll get you all squared away. Yes, ma'am. Get home. Hubby takes the tags off. And he was like, it cost how much now? And I was like, oh, no worries. We'll get walloped tomorrow. And he was like, well, while you're at it, he was like, we really do need tires. Go ahead, call around, find out what tires are. He heads off to work. I, research a couple of tire places, find the one that's really close to us that, because there's 2 or 3 places. He was like, I don't care if they're used. I don't care about any of that. These front tires are shot. They could blow at any time now. And the ones in the back are just shoddy enough. He was like, that rotating them to the front's just not possible. They just, no mechanic worth their salt will do it. So I was like, okay. So aim for all 4 tire set. He was like, if you can. I'm like, okay. So I called 2 different tire shops. But one, of course, that is the more name brand, they have a warranty. Okay, I'm all about warranties. So I set up a time with them. It must have been the number that did it. I set up a time with them for 9:30 on Friday. Thinking I could drop off the baby, take care of that, go out, find this shop. It's literally like 2 minutes from my house. Once I figured out where it was, I was like, oh, there we go. Yeah, I do like how everything is close. I will say that. So, day goes on as normal. I manage to get to bed, but I don't sleep very well. By this time, it's, we have the money in the bank, which all of a sudden becomes stressful. And the DMV thing went rather better than we expected. So that's creating a whole new type of stress. So in the morning, I find out that hubby has not gotten any sleep at all. As in, my eldest is awake, and he reports Dad was up and down all night. I look in the sink. Sure enough, Dad woke up at some point in time and ate his dinner. So I was kind of ticked off because he wanted me to wake him at a certain time. I had no other information at this time. And I went to go wake him, and he was like, yeah, I'll be up. I'm like, okay, whatever. Now I'm awake. So, I'm like, I'll just go ahead and make coffee. My eldest informs me he's been up all night. And I'm like, wow, that shoots any anger right out of my sails. So I go ahead and I'm like, well, I'm awake. I'm moving. I made him coffee, whatever. I'll make sure the coffee is there, and I'll just shut off the coffee pot. Here I am already running over. That is just crazy, guys. At 33, and I'm not even done yet. So, yeah. I'll have to put warnings on it. This is like super stupid long. So, I'm like, hell with it. I'll go. So, I take the car, which now I don't have to sweat driving the hour to Tacoma. Yes, guys, I drove an hour to get to this garage on shitty ass tires. I would do it on shittier tires, double that long, if that's what it took. Just to let you know how much I love this garage. So I get there, and I find the garage has more people. Okay, so I'm guessing that some of the COVID restrictions being lifted and the swarm of business I know they were getting just kind of forced them to hire in some more people. I get there, and I discover that the guy who was originally there, he isn't there anymore. I don't know exactly what the circumstances are, but everybody's acting kind of shifty about it. Like, I'm guessing the guy did something wrong. I really hope not, but I'm guessing he did something wrong. And I tell him on the 10 o'clock, they've got a new computer system, and she's like, let me go ahead and put in your information all over again. So I tell her, I'm like, I'm the one brakes, oil change, tune-up. She is like, okay, well, they'll do, research on your car and find out what kind of tune-up you need. I'm like, there's kinds? And she was like, yes, ma'am. So I'm there for a bit, discover my Kindle has not been charged. She actually unhooks the sign, the neon sign that says Emily's Garage, finds me a charger, everything. That's how awesome this place is, guys. A little bit later, I've been there about an hour and 15 minutes. I ask, how much for the bag of chips? There's like big bag of freaking Cheetos. And she was like, just take it. That's how awesome this garage is. Anyway, so the guys come out and they were like, your brakes are at like 80%. I said, all of them. They were like, all of them. Your brakes are good. Okay. Who told you your brakes were bad? And I was like, well, the guy that we came through here before, like maybe about a year ago, he said we may need to get our brakes checked. So we just automatically assumed that our brakes were going bad because she has a little bit of trouble with her brakes. I'm like, is that her tires? The guy was like, oh yeah, your tires are shot. So if you've been having problems with braking, most likely it's your tires. He's like, these tires are truly terrible. I mean, if I'm like, no, tires are being taken care of, guys. Tires are being taken care of. I've got an appointment tomorrow morning at 9:30. They were like, okay, good. Oh my goodness. Yes, good. Because these tires just are not road appropriate. We are worried about your safety on them. I'm like, okay. So my brakes are good. They tell me you just need an air filter change and your spark plugs changed. They happily show me what the spark plugs look like. They were rusted. And I asked them if they can put back in the parking brake fuses. And the guy was like, well, when you go to do that, you're going to have a system reset. He was like, we can clear the computer for certain things that we work on. He was like, but we can't reset the system. You'd have to take it to a dealership. I was like, damn it. And I hate dealerships. And I told him, like, our first encounter with a dealership here was just terrible. And he was like, yeah, he's like, but they're the only ones who can do that. They're the only ones who can upgrade the computer, which it most likely will need at some point in time. I'm like, okay. He's like, it's not a must thing. He was like, but it really wouldn't hurt to do it sometime. Okay. So the only thing they're waiting on is spark plugs. Because I was like, so, oil, is there anything about the oil change that you want me to tell you or anything? And he's like, nope, oil change is already done. You're already good there. He's like, we're just waiting on spark plugs. Now, at this time, I've been there about 45 minutes to an hour. That's not too bad. I expect to be there, I had allotted time. I had allotted like 2 or 3 hours. I was going to tell my husband, just go ahead, call your work, tell him you're going to be late because I expected brakes to be worked on at this time. He's like, the only thing we're waiting for is the spark plugs. So right around 11:43. He was like, done. Not but 10 minutes before, they were like, we're just still waiting for your spark plugs. We have no idea what's going on. So I'm guessing the van that had pulled through had given me the spark plugs. And she had let me know, she's like, I'm really sorry you're waiting. We're just waiting on the parts to come in. She was like, he's got everything ready to go ahead and get the spark plugs, put in there and taken care of. I'm like, okay. Like literally 10 to 15 minutes after that, they're coming out telling me it's all good. So I go ahead and call my husband because I called him as he requested, like right around 11:43 to let him know I'm probably going to be calling you to wake you up to go get the baby. And it was like right around 11:30, 11:43, just before they came out to tell me spark plugs are all good. And I was like, I'll call you right around that time so you can go and walk down and pick up the baby because the school's like right up the road here. And he was like, okay, you call me when you do that. I'm like, you may want to go ahead, just in case, call your work and let them know you're going to be running a little bit late. He's like, I already called in. And I was like, you called in? He was like, yeah, I didn't know how long it was going to take. Which, fair enough. I mean, breaks can take a while. He was like, I didn't know how long it was going to take. He was like, and I didn't get any sleep last night. I'm like, okay, it's cool, dude. I'm not mad. So, I was a little bit mad, but not mad. So they come up a few minutes later. They're like, you're done. Holy shit. So I'm on the road right around noon. I stop by our little 7-Eleven, say hello to the ladies there because, we miss them and they miss us. Did a little bit of gossip, like grab myself a little bit of something to snack on and hit the road. Go to pick up the baby. Call my husband on the way. I'm like, don't worry about it. He was like, I'll get up. I'm like, no, stay put. I'm calling you to tell you to not panic if you wake up around 1 o'clock and realize you have not gotten the baby. I am on my way home now. I got the baby. You're all good. just stay asleep. So I get there like literally on the dot. On the dot. I'm supposed to pick up the baby at 1:15. I got it on the dot. Pull up in front and the car goes doot, 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 doot. When I apply the brakes, it's between 10 to 15 miles an hour. I'm letting her slow. And the car just shudders. The engine just shudders to itself. And I like literally, it's like stop, start. It's one of those jerking things. She goes 1, 2, 3. Then stops like nothing's a problem. I see my youngest wave to him, unlock the car. And I'm calling Emily's at the same time. Emily's garage. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, I was just there. And they were like, oh, yes. We know who you are, Amanda. And I was like, okay. I'm like, this is what happened. And the lady's like, really? I'm like, yes, ma'am. It was like the engine shuddered. And she just kind of, jolt, jolt, jolt. And then came to a stop like nothing was going on. She's like, I'm going to go speak with a mechanic. By the time the baby gets in the car, she comes back on. And she was like, I spoke with a mechanic. Where do you live? I'm like, I live about an hour away. And she was like, can you come back? I'm like, no, ma'am. I just picked up my youngest. I'm heading home. And she was like, I'm like, I won't be able to probably do this until another time. She was like, no. What's your address? I'm like, ma'am, I'm in Bremerton. She was like, yeah. She was like, you told me that. What's your address? So I give her my address. She was like, we'll have somebody out within the next couple of hours to look at your car. I'm like, I'm in Bremerton. That's an hour away. And she was like, no, ma'am. No, ma'am, that's not important. She was like, we worked on your car. Your car should not be doing that, according to the mechanic. Your car should not be doing that at all. She was like, we're going to go ahead and send somebody out to make sure that everything is okay and double check the work. I was like, okay. Now, I want you to stop and think. When I'm at Emily's, didn't get brakes done, which would have been expensive. Got a tune-up, got an oil change, spark plugs, all that. Got the tune-up and the oil change and got it for $318. That's pretty much unheard of. They checked my brakes, my shocks, my struts. They basically did a full vehicle check. Did my air filter, did my spark plugs. And labor was like $140. I mean, the parts were like, were something like $160. Something like that. I mean, all the different parts. So they did all these checks. And I showed the bill to my husband. I mean, he was like, this is just not possible. He's like, this is not possible. I mean, things like, air filter, spark plug, oil change. The oil change is like $43.98. And they broke it down how they came up with that. Air filter was $52.97. Spark plugs $187.52, and there was like it was removal and replacement, and it was $120 for the spark plugs. Each spark plug broke down to something like there was 4 of them that were needed. It's 4 spark plugs that were needed. So, yeah. $318. My husband went, this is just not possible. When he woke up a little bit later. He's like, this is not possible. Then they confirmed my phone number. After finding out my address is. We'll call you when we're almost there. So when my husband wakes up, like right around 2 o'clock, I'm waiting to see where they're at, and I tell him what's going on. I'm like, so they're going to call me or something. They're going to pull up here. And he's like, they're going to what? And I'm like, they're on their way. He was like, they're in Tacoma. I'm like, yeah, they might be sending somebody from Everett. I'm like, from what I understand, they have 2 or 3 chains. They might be sending somebody closer by. And he was like, I don't know about that. Now, what was so funny is while I was there at Emily's garage, I met the owner. I met the actual Emily. She's not an imaginary fictional character. She's an actual person. She owns the garage, Emily's garage. She owns 2 or 3 of them. And it is very female-oriented. They usually try to hire in a lot of female workers if they can. A lot of the mechanics are male, but they do have 2 or 3 female mechanics. She's one of them. So I bragged to my husband how I had met Emily. Well, right around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Emily knocks on my door. She was like, I decided to come myself. She was like, and I brought my best mechanic, a guy I recognize who I think runs the shop. And I was like, holy shit. My husband had already cleared the garage so we could pull the vehicle in because it was raining. We didn't want them working in the rain because that's just rude. So we had shoved a lot of the junk over to one side. It was a little bit cramped. A lot of the junk isn't ours. We just haven't gotten rid of it yet. So we shoved a lot of it off to one side. And we pulled the vehicle in. And they're like, oh, that's nice. And I told her, I'm like, I just bragged to my husband and how I met you. And now you're right here at my house. I'm like, I really hope I didn't drag you guys down here for nothing. And I described exactly what happened. And they both went, yeah, she should not be doing that. So we walk him towards the garage, let him in. He pops open the door. And he takes a meter and he plugs it in underneath the dash. And he's checking her, and he's like, okay, everything's fine here. Next thing he does, gets in the vehicle, turns it over, pops the hood right there in the garage. And he's going, are there any lights? We have an overhead light. And he was like, oh, yeah, good. Immediately, while the car's running, starts taking it apart. I was like, oh, my God, please don't electrocute yourself in my garage. And he looks around. And, at one point in time, you could tell he's a hugger. He, reaches over, gives me this one-armed hug. I'm like, oh, my gosh, please don't tell me I dragged you guys an hour away for nothing. Because he tells me the meter says there's nothing wrong. And he was like, no, it's not nothing. He was like, the vehicle normally should not do that. He was like, we have, the mechanic who worked on your car, he's really good. He's really good and he's really fast. He was like, but we also think he's trying to impress us. Normally, after we do extensive work, like changing the spark plug, especially spark plugs that were as bad as yours, changing the spark plugs in the air filter and doing an oil change, he was like, we have to clear the computer system. Because the computer is used to reading the air filtration system and the spark plugs a certain way. And since your spark plugs were bad enough where there was blood, you could actually see where it would arc, right on the spark plug itself, and the top looked rusted, and it was bad. He was like, with the spark plugs like yours, we have to clear the system so the computer relearns the part. He was like, he was worried about you being there so long, so he didn't test drive her. Normally we encourage, after work like that, and after we clear the computer, to test drive it so we can run it through its RPMs. So we can run it all the way up to 4 or 5 and then all the way back down so the system can get a chance to read them. Each, between 20 and 35 miles per hour has to be read, and it has to run like that for a certain amount of time so the system can read it and understand what's going on. And I'm like, oh, okay. I said, so, I do 35 in the streets. He was like, yeah. I said, about 45 in other areas. He was like, yeah. I said, I get up on the roads, 65, 70. He was like, yeah. And I said, and then I go up the hill and I go to pull into my kid's school. I'm doing about 10, 15. And he was like, exactly. And it hadn't read that yet. So when you tried to stop, I was like, I'd only been doing 10 to 15, maybe a minute and a half. And he was like, yep. And she reacted. He was like, you may get occasional judders if she hits a speed and sustains it for a certain amount of time, and she's not used to that speed yet, and she hasn't read it. She's trying to look for old information on it, and she's not finding it. So she has to insert the information, and it can cause a little bit of shuddering. He was like, you shouldn't have that issue anymore. He was like, because it sounds like she's cycled through and she's read everything she's supposed to. So they basically broke down exactly what was going on. Told me the car is fine. He checked everything. She checked it right on top of it. They went and they checked all connections. They checked everything. They looked at the work. He looked, she looked. They explained to us what was going on. They explained the reason why it was going on. Apologized the guy did not do a road test. And I'm like, okay, I didn't even know that was a thing. Because dealerships and things like that I've gone to, even when they do a tune-up, they usually don't road test it. At least not in my experience. Not that I've ever seen. Of course, they might be doing it where I'm not seeing it. But I used to be able to record my mileage. I usually recorded my mileage. I'd never seen that done before. So He was like, yeah, I apologize for that. And he's trying to impress us. And I'm like, well, I don't want him in trouble. He's like, he's not in trouble, but we do need to talk to him that when he does work like this, especially for a vehicle that's had like bad spark plugs for a while, and you clear the computer, we kind of encourage you to do a road test. Just let the customer know that it may be a few minutes longer. And I'm like, well, hopefully I didn't make the guy feel rushed. And he was like, no, he was just hyper aware that you've been waiting for the spark plugs for anywhere between half an hour to 40 minutes. He had everything undone and ready to go. And he just didn't road test it. He wanted to get you out the door and get you on your way with your vehicle fixed. And they were like, and besides, we didn't mind dropping by here and taking, an extra look at the vehicle. It never hurts to double check the work if we feel there's an issue. Everything's fine here. You shouldn't have any more issues. But if you do, feel free to call us. Let us know what's going on. We can either send a tech out or, set up a time for you to come out if it's really serious. I was like, okay. And Emily herself was like, well, a friend of mine that I worked with for a long time, hey, she opened up a brewery here in Bremerton. I guess maybe we'll stop by since we're in the area and have a look. And I'm like, you go ahead, you do that. She was like, so a purely selfish reason to come out. I want to see my friend and see her new restaurant. She was like, see what kind of, restaurant and brewery she's got going. So, yeah, we were on our way there. We decided to drop by here. So that was super cool. I asked them what I owed. They said I owed them nothing. Nothing. Hubby and I tried to tip them because we felt like crap because they came down here to check work that was perfectly fine. The vehicle just hadn't adjusted to anything yet. They wouldn't accept a tip. Just all around lovely people. The first thing I did was I'm like, you know what? I don't think I've done a review for Emily's Garage yet. So I sat down and wrote a review, glowing review like they deserve, because every time I've been there, just the top staff, professionalism out the yin yang, just the sweetest people, the most helpful, and they give you a fair price. They don't try to gut you. And if there's something they can't do, they know somebody to recommend you to. And they have people who are just as ethical that they deal with. So that works for me. So that was Thursday. I find out the baby doesn't have school today. It's like some type of makeup day. So I go in to get the tires done. So I've got 4 brand new tires in my car. And all 4 tires, they're all weather, 40,000 mile. For $686. So guys, I set aside about $3,500 for the car altogether. With gas in the car, we made it up close to about $1,500. Maybe. No, not even that. We made it close to about $1,100 with gas in the car twice this week. Yeah. So, yeah. So for approximately $1,100 altogether, my car is registered and temporarily tagged and will soon be tagged. She has a complete inspection. The tire place checked her shocks and struts and everything else and declared her good, said her front end is tight, everything's fine. In fact, even the crappy ass tires were all worn in the same place. So this vehicle she's stellar. But once again, like on my way out, the guy was like, I apologize, your TPM light is on. And I'm like, what? Of course, I can't. I forgot. It's that little exclamation point that tells you your tire pressure is low. He didn't do a road test. He didn't do a road test. And I'm like, it's cool. I don't care. So I get in my car and the panel is red and it's going, you have 38, 71, 0, 15. I'm like, I fixed that in about 2 minutes. I literally just drove up the road and it reset itself. But I'm going to have to take it back there tomorrow because the tires are all uneven. I don't know why. The tires are all uneven. 41, 37, 38, 33. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to have them check the tire pressure tomorrow. Just take it right up there and take care of that. But so far, guys, that has been my week. Today, I got the official all clear from the temporary agency, so I can start, technically start on Tuesday, though Monday I'll be getting my badge. And not too long ago, I completed all the paperwork that needed to be completed, and a couple more that didn't need to be completed for my onboarding for the naval security job. I am completely exhausted. I feel like I've been beaten with tire irons. Hubby and I sat down and discussed the rent situation. I'm like, well, I told him I want to send him $6,000, you know, by this time, you know, by the 12th. And he was like, honey, no. He was like, we'll do $3,000 now. We'll see if we can do $3,000 next couple of weeks, and you'll have some paychecks underneath your belt. And if we do get the money in from the COVID-19 relief, awesome. It was like, then we'll be able to give them $3,000 a couple weeks after that. And I'm like, and by that time we'll be caught up. Because think about it. November, December, $3,000. January, February, $3,000. We're in March. So March, April, $3,000. Oh, speaking of. Hey, hon, I'll have to call you back. I'm in the middle of a post.
Bye.
All right, honey. The guy I need to call back. So that is a good excuse to let you go after nearly spending an hour eating up your time. Apologies, but I had to like cram 3 very eventful days in there. Hubby is now suspicious because there is no way in hell that all of this could cost so much less than we anticipated. But he wants to do it in 3,000 increments. And by that time, we should have enough built up, and we'll still be able to put something away. You know, pay off a couple of extra bills, like credit card or reserve line. That's pretty much what we're looking forward to. So things should be getting a lot better. It's just, I think for us, the reason why it's so boggling, the reason why I feel like I've been beaten with a tire iron and I'm so tired is not just the lack of sleep. Because I can't wait for, I have to start doing push-ups soon because that is one of the physical requirements. I have to start doing that soon, or else I will really feel like I've been beaten when I go in to do it. But it's because just instant stress relief, but at the same time, stressed out because we have the money to pay the bills. Now it's just making sure that they are paid and that we're covered. And we have a little bit of, I just dropped about 60 some odd bucks on Chinese food last night. It's going to last us a couple days for lunches and things like that. But I just dropped about 60 bucks. I don't do that. But he was like, a little bit of play money doesn't hurt. We got this tax refund back. We've taken care of what we need to take care of. We will take care of what we need to take care of. He was like, just don't be in a rush to get us all caught up at once. He was like, do it by increments. And I completely get this. But I told him, I'm like, by April, it will be, I'm like, right now, as of right now, we owe $7,500. By April, it will be $9,000. He was like, they'll get it. He's like, we'll just give it to him in chunks. He's like, I'm not depending on the COVID relief. He was like, but we'll just give it to him in chunks as we've got it. So that's sensible. That makes sense. So that has been my 3 days, guys. A pretty wild ass ride. Car is completely up to code, up to date, roadworthy. New tires. She runs like a dream. It seems all the mechanics who touch her basically have thought that, well, why'd you bring the car in? Other than the shady tires and the fact she needs an air filter and spark plugs. And an oil change doesn't hurt, but, oh, I'm going to tell you, Jeeps are fantastic. I do apologize. I have been behind on absolutely everything. But Miss M, I did receive that card. Dee Dee, do send that fiction. And guys, thank you ever so much for pimping the tarot posts. Keep doing so. I'm more than happy to continue to do tarot. I am not stupid. Every little bit always does help. But I wanted to say thank you and let you know that I'm sorry I dropped off the radar the last couple of days. It has been an insane last couple of days. I have been enjoying the surprising good luck of not paying out the nose, while hubby has been slightly paranoid about not paying out the nose. He thinks everything is going a little bit too smoothly. And I'm like, well, even our bad luck here in Washington State has a tendency to turn on its head. Any bad luck we get has a tendency to turn on its head. So I feel that, you know, the last several months have been highly stressful. So we deserve a bit of relief, and that's what this is. So hopefully things will smooth out, just be middle of the road from here on out. Oh, but you should be seeing me catch up on posts soon. If you made it all the way through this daggone post, you deserve a damn cookie. But thank you for stopping and checking it. Thank you for stopping to listen. Yes, that was the youngest back behind me. Yes, that was my hubby who called. I am definitely going to have to call him back. So, take good care of yourselves, guys. And that was the eldest. Take good care of yourselves, guys. Take good care of each other. I guess I probably better get back to being mom and taking care of things. I got this hour, which was a good one. Get you all caught up on the last couple of days, and here within the next hour or so, since I've gotten everything cleared that I need to get cleared and everything scheduled that I need to get scheduled, I'll be getting caught up with you all. Okay, and you will see me posting and commenting, and then reading your all's posts. So I am not gone away again forever. I'm right here, and I'm so glad to be in my happy place again. And it's always so good to catch up with you all. So I'll definitely be starting doing that tonight and doing it all throughout the weekend. But as I was saying, and you know, until then, guys, take good care of yourselves. Take good care of each other. Know that my family and I, we love you. And I shall see you all soon.